Hey guys, this is Joe, founder and host of Startuprad.io. As you guys may already know, I've run this podcast full-time since January 2021. I'm very happy to announce that Anchor FM is my sponsor for this podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free and it's easy to use, even for a newbie. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Hey everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Startuprad.io, your podcast show with startup news and interviews from Germany.
Welcome everybody, this is another episode of Startuprad.io, your news and interviews from startup country Germany. Today I do have two people with me speaking. Literally there is one person with me in my room here in my small study, crammed together, and we're doing together for the first time. Don't worry about if you hear any noise or something. We're not beating each other. It's very cramped here. And also, we of course do have a guest. Luca, you just want to introduce yourself briefly?
Hi guys, thanks for inviting me. My name is Luca and I'm a founder of Penta, which is a bank for SMEs.
Great. And then I do have here with me in this small space, I do have John. John, you want to tell the listeners something about you?
Hi, I'm Jörn's best friend in a way. That's why he brought me here. No, just kidding. I'm really interested in the startup radio and I'm trying to join these guys. So I'm trying to get the experience and see how it's going on here, and then we can kick it off from here.
That means John is the newest addition to our startup radio team. And the big advantage of him, he's also speaking French. And he's also a native speaker of Arabic. That means we're going to have in the future, hopefully, some podcasts in Arabic. So if you are out there, you speak Arabic and you want to do a startup interview in some relation with Germany, just reach out to us. That was so far enough advertising. Luca, you ended up in startup space. Can you tell us how this came about? I mean, it's a typical question because you don't go to school and say, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to set up a bank. You go to school and say, oh, I want to be a locomotive driver. Oh, I want to be an astronaut. Oh, I want to be whatever, but no entrepreneurship. How did this happen to you?
So I started my I'd say, first kind of business when I was 13, 14 with a friend of mine. I grew up in New York where we were selling sneakers. There were expensive Nike and Jordan sneakers that we sold for $500-$600 on the streets. And from there, I've always had an entrepreneurial drive, especially growing up in New York. And I moved to Paris for university where we were playing with some ideas, and ultimately at 19 we set off and we traveled for a few weeks looking for investment for this crazy idea. It was a machine learning application, and we ended up raising $500,000 through an institutional investor actually. And for a few years, we're working on that. So it's just been really a ride of different startups. Even after that, I've been involved in several others, and then ultimately came to Penta because I realized how big of a need it was. But we'll get into that in a bit.
Just one question. I know that you studied in the American University in Paris, and interestingly enough, I did a semester abroad there. So the world is really small.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about the experience that you got from this system of education, the educational system and the liberal arts? Does it really affect the people in their decision making and how bold they are in taking risks and becoming entrepreneurs and doing startups?
I think that was one of the biggest advantages. I started off studying more or less philosophy, and I realized 2 years into it I absolutely hated anything to do with economics, politics, philosophy. So then I started learning computer science on my own, as well as taking other courses, which luckily the American University of Paris allowed me to do. So I was allowed to take these courses and had a lot of time on my own, and with mingling with hundreds of other students from the different classes. I was able to learn a lot. And so one thing came to the next, where I ultimately started that first startup in school. So it was a complete trip from academia essentially to being an entrepreneur. But I definitely would say that studying in a liberal arts school definitely helped me. I mean, I really don't know. It's really about the choices I made. I just wanted to do something fun. I felt school was a bit boring and I needed something more exciting.
Talking about fun, my listeners already know that I do have a strange sense of humor, but just want to make it clear, when you were selling sneakers on the streets of New York, that was completely legal, right?
Yeah, I was paying taxes actually.
Okay, and then the other question it was, when we've been talking about traveling and trying to discover new ideas, Jörn and I are consultants, so we are taught to use tools. And I do get the feeling entrepreneurs do it more with experience, with a feeling, with an additional sense. How did you approach it? And what are your recommendations for other entrepreneurs?
So ultimately, since I was a kid, actually, I've been reading a lot. And especially when I came to university, I started reading a book or two a week. And I remember reading this one quote from Warren Buffett where he said, when I started off, I was reading 800 to 900 to 1,000 pages per day. And I said, I mean, if I want to do anything serious with my life, I have to read a lot, especially to make up for my age. And but of course, I mean, practice is nothing without actually doing it. So it's so then I set off and I said, hey, I'm going to try this out from the things I've learned. So it's a mix with a lot of books. I mean, like I said, I've always loved academia in that sense, but you have to apply it. I've been just trying to apply what I'm learning constantly. So it is a mix of tools, but it's also a mix of actually experiencing it, because essentially theory and practice are the same in theory, but not in practice.
And can you take us then through the journey how you, of course you're American, but nonetheless how you came from Paris back to the States and did your first startup? And you've also shared with us an article, everything you did wrong in startups that you published, and we're going to put it on the show notes, of course. Can you tell us, and to our listeners, like a little teaser, like a little appetizer, what is in there in this article for them, and in your own words, kind of your experience, everything, lessons learned, stuff like that?
Absolutely. So I think I've made every single mistake possible in just running a company. I was the chief executive of that startup, and I mean, we were spending $15,000 on flights, and we were making the worst decisions. I mean, it was just awful team, and it was just awful chemistry. But this was completely my fault because I was just running the whole show. So I was the biggest deceiver of it all, and I was just trying to put people to the side. I was trying to do this. I was just, I'd say I was a terrible person just running that company, and that's definitely, I'd say, the main reason it went to hell. But it's really just, it's about everything. It's about how you choose your partners. I mean, in that startup, I realized you have to choose your partners the way you would choose your spouse. You're going to be with these people for the next 7 to 10 years. I mean, you're going to marry them. So it's
but that necessarily doesn't mean you just take the most sexy person you can get as a partner to set up a venture, right?
Oh, not at all, not at all. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of merit, of course, but it's a lot about what this person is going to bring to the table. So it's not just about the sexiest person in the room; it's also the smartest person, and most importantly, the person who can accelerate the fastest. So it's also based on potentials. And I mean, I have to look at myself. I mean, I'm not nowhere near perfect, but I feel like my team right now, we're smart, and we have a lot of potential to accelerate, essentially.
Just coming back to one of your statements, you know, I like that. For $15,000, you can do quite a lot. Where did you travel? Antarctica and back?
No, we were just making a lot of flights because the startup was based out of LA, so we were traveling constantly to LA. And we were going to meetings. So one of the subjects I wrote in the article was actually meetings are a complete waste of time, and I still believe that today. So a lot of that money was spent on meetings, and you go to these meetings and you realize that I'd say 110% of what was said at that meeting could have been done on Skype. So a lot of things we found out in person, we realized we don't want to work with this person, but instead we spent I don't know what it was, but let's say $1,500 per flight just to get to one place to the next, and that was absolutely a waste of time. So. And then also there's, for example, lawyers, which I can get into as well. But I think lawyers for a startup are a complete waste. I mean, in the beginning, you need to validate your hypothesis. The last thing you need to do is copyright and file a patent. I mean, it's just not worth it. It's not where your concentration should lie. But in the beginning, that's where our concentration lied. The things we executed the best on were the things that we didn't have to do at all. And essentially, we didn't prove our market fit. We didn't even prove that there was a need for the product. Instead, we concentrated on or got distracted with other things.
To me, it sounds like pretty much you went from a mindset of a big corporation, doing a lot of meetings, doing a lot of legal stuff, into the startup world and just didn't twist your point of view accordingly. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's right on point.
Okay. Before we proceed, just you lived in New York, you lived in Paris. What were the best and the worst parts of it? Disclaimer, we also have someone who's working for us in New York. Christian, mental high five to New York City. And what we experience, for example, our listeners can tell is when there's rain or there's snow, the internet quality goes down dramatically because there's getting water into the cables, and therefore the quality goes down dramatically. So there are some downsides to live in New York, but what have been your upsides, and what did you also like about Paris, and what do you like right now living in Berlin? That would be interesting for me from an international perspective.
I think New York's a great place. Without New York, I wouldn't be here where I am today. I mean, there's always a quote, you can leave New York, but New York will never leave you. And I feel like I took a lot of that from me. So it's very much this hustler mentality where everybody's trying to make money, everybody's trying to do something new, trying to do something different. Nobody really wants to be a copycat. I think that's cool. I like that mentality. I actually haven't been back to New York in about 3 years. Still have a lot of friends there. But I think New York's an absolutely great place. But I do like Europe. I feel that America is very innovative. And I think in America, the great things are happening. But I feel that Europe is not necessarily lacking, but there's so much potential in Europe. And it's ultimately coming to Paris. I think the ambiance in Paris was absolutely amazing. It's this whole creative vibe to Paris that I found beautiful. And that's where the whole thinking started. And that's when I realized, I mean, a little existential part of it, but I realized that there's certain things I want to do in life and certain things I don't. And I wasn't going to let anything stop me from doing the things I wanted. And I think if I didn't have Paris, I wouldn't have realized that. Because New York, I mean, I think everybody can agree with this, especially your friend in New York, your partner. It's very conformist. People finish high school, they go to college, they get an internship, they get a 9-to-5 job. They do this and they get a mortgage. I mean, it's just very typical. And I wanted something different. So that's why I moved to Paris. I was lucky enough to be able to move to Paris. And so I'm always looking for new things and always looking for new challenges, which brought me to Berlin. And I think Berlin is such an innovative place and people are really, really fighting for it. But I remember actually one friend came from New York to Paris and he said, this is the most beautiful city I've seen, but there's no innovation. It's dead. Nothing is moving. And it took me a while to realize that, essentially, until I moved to Berlin, where things are really moving, things are really innovating.
I can relate a lot to Berlin because I lived 3 years in Berlin. I did my master's in Berlin. And it is the place to be if you want to have a startup. It is the hub for startups right now, I would say.
Yeah, and the city is even growing.
That's true.
So it's
here's Jörn, and I would like to disagree. Frankfurt rocks, woo!
Yes, we are in Frankfurt, and I'm working in Frankfurt, but still, my heart is in Berlin still. I want you to tell us a little bit about the Ahoy Berlin, the working space, and the idea of like this alternative working space, and how you want to attract more people to work in your team. So just tell us about it and why it's different and why did you choose it?
I would also like to know, since Frankfurt is usually associated with fintech, and there's a lot of talk about startups leaving London for either Berlin or Frankfurt. Well, I do have to admit in the newspapers it looks like more Berlin to be more active in the marketing there. Why did you not decide on Frankfurt?
I'll first answer that question. I first came to Berlin. I was working in another startup where I was more or less a technical lead. And we started working in a co-working space called Mindspace. And I thought it was pretty cool. And we started going around to the business model. I'm not going to get too much into that business, but the business model was to partner with a lot of co-working spaces. So I met a lot of co-working spaces in Berlin, like Beta House, as well as Ahoy Berlin. I thought Ahoy was really cool, but the funny thing is the press has wrote that we were at Ahoy, and we actually were going to go to Ahoy, but a lot of things changed in the meantime, including getting accepted to Startup Bootcamp. So in the meantime, a lot of things changed with Ahoy Berlin, and we're not there. But I have been to Ahoy. I do know the people who are running Ahoy Berlin. I think it's an absolutely fantastic place if you're a startup and if you want to meet people around you. Getting to the point with Berlin and Frankfurt, it was just it was really chance. I've been to Frankfurt a few times as well, but it was really chance that I came to. I found an attractive offer, so I thought I'd come out there. I mean, I just think there's more resources. Essentially a stronger network. I have a lot of people there as well, so it was also a personal decision more than just a market or business decision. But I think it's great. I mean, Number 26 is out there. There's a payment app called Cookies, which is out there. I know a bunch of fintechs which are out there. These are just to name two, but I think fintech is booming. It really comes down to software. It's not necessarily really about fintech and banking. I mean, a lot of these software, nobody's really creating a new mortgage product. People are more building software to change the financial industry. So it's a bit of a different take to it all. But yeah, I mean, a lot of our partners, for example, some of our partners, or actually all of them are in Berlin. We have spoken to others who are in Munich, as well as Zurich and Frankfurt. So those are the big three. But other than that, I mean, I think for us, at least for fintech, I think being in Berlin is a great place to be.
So let me move to Penta a little bit now. If I have a startup now where I have a small, medium-sized enterprise, why would I use Penta? Why wouldn't I go to a traditional bank or like a competitor of Penta?
Sorry, we talked up front and we read a lot of information you provided us. At first, we just have to tell you you're one of the founders of Penta Bank. And can you tell us a little bit about what Penta is doing and then answer John's question? Because we always have to take our listeners with us.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, absolutely. So after my partners and I, we were building a lot of businesses, and we realized that, I mean, I remember for the first startup, for example, and I'll get to the Europeans, but for the first startup, we were using Wells Fargo, and we had to go to the branch to send international payments. They didn't have international payments online. Ironically, so this was a couple of years ago, but ironically, Wells Fargo just allowed that in the middle of July 2016. So, I mean, it's pretty Stone Age. But going to the European ones, it took us 4 weeks to open up a bank account in Germany, and that's the average I've heard. The online interface is absolutely terrible. The processes are slow. There's no real-time account balancing. And we started speaking to a lot of people. And we said, I mean, how is your bank? What's going on with your bank? What are you using? And they said, my bank is expensive. The online interface is awful. And we realized essentially that a lot of people had the exact same problem. So what we did is we started doing some research into, I mean, how do you build a bank? That sounds absolutely nuts. So we did some research into some other banks, for example, like Number 26, Mondo in the UK, but Mondo is more recent, but a few other banks. And we said, hey, I mean, if you essentially leverage infrastructure from others, if you partner with the right people, you can build a bank. I mean, I just want to make it clear, we're not a bank. We're not calling ourselves a bank because we don't have a banking license. So we are partnering with somebody that I'm not ready to disclose right now, as we haven't finalized anything. But we are partnering with somebody like a white label bank, for example, Wirecard, Solaris Bank, Fidor, just to name a few, to be able to offer the banking service. I hope I answered the question, but ultimately we were facing this problem and a lot of our peers were as well.
Sorry to be a little bit mean here, but you say you offer better banking services, and what I do understand, you want to make it easier, you want to make it faster for your clients, for small and medium enterprises, and I would say also for people, sole contractors, freelancers, right?
Our initial target market, just for essentially our first year in beta, would be high-tech companies, 3 to 30 employees who make below 1 million revenue per year. That's our target market. And you're right, I actually didn't answer the first question. So the banking processes are very slow. They're awful. The sign-up processes are terrible, and they're expensive. But we don't want to just concentrate on the core banking where we're offering deposits and transactions. And basically that's it. That's going to be commoditized in the next 5 years. Every single bank in the world, hopefully, is going to be offering those services online, and they're going to balance accounts in real time. So that's not where we're focusing. That's definitely something that we first have to solve, because if we don't solve that, then we can't do the other things. But some of the things we're doing is we're completely redefining the user interface and how a bank communicates with its customers. Particularly for us, we're automizing the whole processes, and we're creating this, I don't want to get into too much detail, but we're creating this type of system where a user is able to directly see exactly what's happening in their account, and they're able to automize everything around them. So it's, for example, scheduling invoices or scheduling payroll, as well as seeing accounting or automating accounting from the beginning, which goes to the different tools and fintech services and apps that we want to integrate. So it's not just about payments and deposits. It's also about the tools that businesses can use to essentially empower themselves. And this comes from, let's say, cash flow management. If you understand how your business is doing from a liquidity standpoint, we see that you're running low on cash for, let's say, payday. We can offer you a loan directly on our platform from a third-party service that you're able to take out within minutes. Or if you have excess capital, we'll introduce you to different, let's say, B2B lenders or investment products that can allow you to put your money in a safe place or essentially a more rewarding place. So it's a matter of using different tools and wrapping that around with a great user experience and interface for businesses.
I do understand that. I also think it's very, very useful because everybody out there who ever run a business, they know the first and most important thing is your liquidity. Everybody tells you it's the team, but the team will soon be gone when you don't get to pay them. So basically,
that's right.
Always keep track on your liquidity and always do forecast, even though it's only Excel. Even though it's only a simple Excel sheet, it can help you out a lot.
That's right.
I was just wondering, because you're going to redo the user experience, I found this very, very good because there's some apps out there from banks who would highly profit from from being reviewed by a startup, let's say it that way. But in the end, you still need, on the other side, partners to work with. Maybe a white label bank behind you that do have a banking license, or maybe your partners. And my question is here, how can you actually be different in the services you're offering here? Because there's a bank in the background, they have to follow these rules, they have to do this and that. How can you be faster and better than the banks? I do understand the banks you named, you're potentially working with, they're better, they're faster, but they're still banks, so they have to adhere to all the oversight, all the regulations, all of this stuff. They'll also need all the legal papers that you have there. Maybe they're processing it faster, but if you do have to wait 2 weeks for some papers to be issued, it will still take 2 weeks. How can you accelerate that here?
That's a great question. Actually, nobody's asked us that before, and it's something that we were wondering in the beginning. So when you're...
I'm sorry, I'm a consultant in this area. That's why I'm curious.
Yeah. So when you're starting off and you're speaking to these white label partners, you sit down in these workshops and you outline the different functions that you want to create. So if we go to KYC or know your customer, it's when you're onboarding essentially a customer to the bank.
For our listeners, this is basically when you are in Europe, just have to show your passport, and where it's in America still sufficient if you do have a social security ID.
Yep, that's right. And so if we're, let's say, for example, retail, at the moment you can do retail banking within, or for individual accounts, you can open up an account in about 8 minutes. For businesses, it's much more difficult because you have to verify the executives or the officers in the company, as well as to see that the company is registered. So there's some things that you have to do ahead of time that you have to sit down and agree with your white label partner of how you're going to do it and what you plan to do. At the moment, we're sitting down with a couple of our potential partners to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Based on their approval of whether we're compliant with the German regulatory body or the BaFin, we have the green light to go ahead. So it's actually, a lot of it's pre-planned. We can already foresee what problems we'll have and what problems we won't have. So come to the question of, will it take 2 weeks? It won't take 2 weeks because we'll know months in advance how long it's going to take. So it's more about execution than it is about essentially the waiting time.
Oh, okay. So now I understand. You basically give your potential clients a checklist, and if they come in with, or if they approach you, maybe physically, maybe digital, with everything you need to have, basically you're good and you can open an account in, let's say, 10 minutes. But if they don't have it, it will still take time, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we're completely digital. You won't be able to sign up through a branch or in person. But for example, we'll have in the beginning, if you're a business and you're signing up, you need some documents from when you registered. You can upload that directly before you have a call with one of our customer service representatives. We can probably finish the minutes online very quickly. And I don't want to promise any numbers, whether it's minutes or hours, but we are aiming for it to be done within the same day.
For everybody who doesn't know Germany, because we do have hotspots of people listening, for example, in India, namaste out there, the US and the UK, there's a public register in Germany where companies like a German version of an LTD or PLC have to be registered. And therefore, we just talking about more or less official. No, we're talking about only official printouts of this, like Handelsregisterauszug. So it's a trading register printout that you're going to have to show that is validating, okay, this company is really not a hoax. This is registered with this court, because you have to do it in the lower court in Germany, and it's registered with this number in this part here and there, and you can always go there and read everything up from there. And everything that is stated there also has what you call in Germany public faith. That means you can rely on everything that is written there.
Yeah, that's completely right. And that's exactly the issues we're trying to solve, so we can do it extremely quickly.
And now, of course, you're going to have a lot of people approaching you due to our interview. But how are you going to get your clients? And we just talked about some current account banking, and you're going to have a third party for loans, a third party for investment products. What are you going to actually offer the client except from the payment services?
So do you mean us as a bank or us as a whole product offering?
Everything you got to offer.
So one of our creeds is that if we can't do something the best in the industry, we're not going to do it. So what we're ultimately offering is what we're best at. And what we're best at is to essentially offer the different products and services that make sense for businesses. So different businesses have different needs, whether you're a one-man show, a cab driver, for example, or whether you're a 30-person business or a 300-person business. It's all completely different. Ultimately, we're aiming to offer curated services and tools for specific types of businesses. Essentially, our job to curate exactly what they need. And a lot of it's going to be coming from us. A lot of it we will be offering ourselves, whether it's loan products or different products like that. Of course, until we have a banking license, we can't exactly do that on our own. But it really depends. It really depends on what we see that a business needs and how we see that we can personally innovate as a company.
Cool. Like, this, as I understand it, is cool. But like, how would you reach those people? Like, how would you get to your target market, and how would you convince them? Like, I'm a cashless startup, and I need deposits and I need loans. And why would I get Penta Bank? And how would I get to know about Penta?
So at the moment, we have a couple hundred businesses signed up. I mean, we started a full push on the PR and marketing side of it in June. So, and actually in the last couple of weeks, we haven't had a lot of time for marketing as we're raising funds and going to different investor pitches. But we've actually had a lot of success with onboarding the users. So our mentality in our first startup, which was first get the money, then get the users. So what we did is we went for the money, and then we tried to get the users. That didn't work. So our mentality was different now. We said, let's not spend a penny. Let's onboard a couple of hundred users and see where that takes us. And ultimately, by doing that, we were able to validate everything we're doing. And we contacted and we spoke with we tried to contact everybody. And we spoke to most of the businesses that have signed up, and which helped us understand their needs. So from a product validation perspective, it's crucial that startups do this. A lot of them just run to market and think everybody's just going to come and start using it. So at the moment, we have had a lot of success with that, and we will continue to do that. One of the things that we're innovating, which as well as changing the communication between businesses and its bank as well as with other businesses, is essentially we're creating this new type of confirmation tool where when a payment is sent, or when certain business is done between two businesses from a Penta account, there's a confirmation sent to the other business. Essentially what this is doing, it's helping spread the word that a bank that's modern and that creates value for both parties exists. So it's a lot on the word of mouth basis. It's a lot on the inherent marketing. We're strong believers as a team that every single product should be able to market itself. If a product doesn't have that, then it's essentially worthless. If we look at big examples like Facebook with the network effect, Facebook doesn't work if there's only one user, but it does work if there's two. So we're essentially trying to create this type of network effect where it makes sense for other businesses to come on board, essentially open a Penta account. And at the moment, we've just purely through blogging and through PR, we have been getting a lot of new leads and a lot of interesting contacts from investors to accelerators and cool guys like you. So we're going to continue that as well as concentrate on the virality within the product.
Cool. Let me shift to another question and let me play the role of the devil's advocate in a way. Like, I really find it bold that you're going into the banking industry at a point in time like this. Like, especially in the German market, like if you see the biggest two institutions, like for example, Deutsche Bank and Commerzbank, like those guys have lots of problems. And they're kind of like, so many critics of the banking industry are saying that it's going to be controlled by the European Central Bank, for example, and the BaFin in Germany as a like sub example, or like a lower local regulatory body. How do you see this as a challenge for you, and how do you see this as an opportunity? If the bigger banks are having problems, how can you like fill in, and how can you actually survive? In like, some critics are saying that banking is actually dying out.
So, and that's a great point. That last point, I forget that. Please remind me. But Deutsche Bank is having a lot of financial troubles. On top of the regulatory perspective, their stock has plummeted in the past couple of months. They're not looking too good from a financial perspective. They're leveraging themselves too much. I mean, it's typical. I mean, it's typical banking in 2008, 2009. I wouldn't say it's the same, obviously, but it's quite similar. So from that perspective, it's mainly financial. We're facing different problems. It's not the same problems. It's mainly oriented around essentially onboarding customers and essentially offering the best services. So the banks are creating this lock-in effect with their customers where they're not allowed, where they're essentially their users locked into the certain products they're offering, whether it's a loan product or whether it's a certain payment product. We're not doing that. We're planning to offer just different services to everybody as a whole.
That's pretty interesting. I would be looking forward to the new bank. And of course, we would be more than happy to have you back on a second episode to tell us a little bit more about it.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. Thanks for this interview.
Thanks very much, Lucas.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yes, great. Thank you. Great to have you here.